Right, so today we're going to be continuing on with Practical 11, but we're going to be looking at Task 4 today. Now, Task 4 continues on from Task 3 in the fact that you are opening a text file, you're taking the data and you split it into three parallel arrays, whereas this Task 4 is going to be taking the parallel arrays from the last period and the file from the last one, the last task, and we're going to be allowing the user to enter data into the text file. So we're not just going to open the file up to read, today we're going to open up the file to append. Now, the first step when we open up our task 4 button is we are going to make sure that our parameter passing is correct. Now, for the procedure enter new data, these are the parameters that need to be passed. We've got number items, which is the same as the number items from the last period. So it contains the number of items from task 3. So when we opened up the file from task 3, looked for every separate item and divided it by 3 to gather the number of items, that value has carried over. Country is an array that we're going to be changing when we ask the user to enter the data. Now remember, when you're doing your parameter passing, when you are changing the value of the parameter, you use your ampersand to, sorry, I keep calling it an ampersand, the @ sign, to show that it's going in and getting changed. Now, in send to file, we need to use our parameter passing again, but this time nothing's been changed in send to file, so all we're doing is copying and pasting it exactly as is. Okay? Now, in the procedure on enter new data, this is the procedure that allows the user to enter the information. Okay? Now, we're going to be using a counter in this so that we can do a loop and if we need to. So if we're going to do it for just one bit of data being entered, but what you could do is ask the user for how many countries they want to enter. You would use that number to loop for the amount of items, and you can add on different ones, but we're only going to look at one today, and then if any extension tasks, you can put more in. Okay? Now, the first thing we need to do is we are going to be asking to enter new data. I've clicked the button, so we need to increment the number of items in the file. Now, there is two ways in which you can do this. The first one is the easiest one, in which we're going to just add 1 to number items. Okay. Now, what this does is, when we've pressed the button to add on a new country, we've taken the number of items from the last period and we have added 1 onto that number. Okay, so when we ask the user to enter the information, when we are appending that to the end of the file, we can use number items to identify the value in the array that we're going to be using. Okay, now if you were to use a loop to enter multiple values, then you would be changing this every time. Okay, so you could put number items plus 1 into number of items, okay, for your running total. Right, now we're going to be asking for and storing the information about the country that we're entering the information on. Now, this is the usual input. We're going to be asking to enter the name of the country, and then we're going to put it into the array country, but we're going to be storing it in number items, the index number items. Okay, so what I'm going to do is stop talking, put some music on, and you can watch me do that. Okay.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in their cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep. I love everything. Fire spreading all around my room. My world's so bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright. Hush. spreading all around my room. My world's so bright, it's hard to breathe, but that's alright. Hush.
That I've not turned my microphone on. Okay. So now that we've entered the code to type in the information for the country that we're going to be adding to the file, I thought we'd quickly go over it. Okay, so here in the first part, we're asking the user to enter the country's name. Now, if the result, this obviously, it means if they click cancel, it stops the program, but this line here is the line where it might be slightly confusing. Okay, so we are taking what the person has typed in, the user's typed in, and we have put it into the string array country at the position or the index number items. Okay, now remember, number items was the variable we got from our last task, task 3. So we know how many items are in the text file already, and number items has saved that because we're using a global variable. It's accessible with the whole program. Okay, so when we added 1 to number of items, we have created an empty index, and we are storing the information being typed in by the user in that empty index. So, doing the same for the currency down here, so we're putting what they type in for this question into the, obviously, the string array currency at the same position as we've entered the country's name, but to make the program more user friendly, we have taken the name of the country that we got in the last part and we've added it on to the end of the question. So it will, so if, for example, the program is ran and they've typed in Scotland here, this line here will say, please enter the currency used by, and this will put a space in, and this bit here will show the name of the country. So this, if we put in Scotland, would say, please enter the currency used by Scotland. Okay? And we've done the same down here for the exchange rate, and we are storing what the user types in into the array called exchange rate at position number items. Okay? Now, this is where it gets slightly different from our previous programs in the fact that we are going to be in the procedure send to file, we are going to be opening the file, we're going to be taking what the user has typed in the previous procedure, and we're going to write it to the end of the file. Okay? Now, to do that, we have to, again, open the file first of all. So, same as before, we're going to put the file name of this stack into the file path. Okay, now remember what that line does is it takes the file path of this program and it's going to take that and it's going to store it in a variable called the file path. We are then going to set the item delimiter, okay, to a / because that is how the file name is separated. Okay, so we can put it into individual bits of data, and this time we're going to put, and then it's going to be task3.txt because that's the name of the file we want to change, and we're going to put that into the last item of the file path. So instead of the program opening up this file here, again we are opening up task3.txt, okay, because this will be saved in the same folder, or should be saved in the same folder if you downloaded the folders from OneDrive, okay, and it's going to be opening up that file instead. Now this is where it is different from before. When you open the file path, okay, we would usually use or so far we would use read here, okay, but remember there's 3 different file handling tasks you have to learn and understand for higher computing science. The first one being read, which we've done already, okay. The next one, the 2 are very similar in the fact that they do the same thing, but how they do it is completely different, okay. Now, we've got append and write. Okay, now append takes the file, opens it up, and then adds whatever you want to at the end of the file. Okay, whereas if you use write, okay, it deletes the current contents of the file and then enters the data you want to enter, and that is the only bit of information in the file. Okay, now because we're not wanting to delete all the data in the file and write our data on top of it, we are going to use append. Now the reason why we use append is we want to add our information at the end of the file. Okay, now once we've opened up our file, we need to then write our contents to the actual file. Okay, now this bit here, where is using the word write, okay, but it's different in that if we used it to open the file for writing, it would delete the contents of the file, but what this part will do is just add the details in. Okay, so write. Now we're going to start off with a return. Now the reason for that is our program is split with obviously returns. Okay, now the reason why we're adding it in here is so that when we add our new data, it puts a return from the last bit of data and then starts and writes our data on a new line. Okay, so when we read the file again, it's still split up. Whereas if we didn't start off with a return, it would take the country name and just add it on to the currency, the exchange rate from the last country that's been entered. Whereas this will allow us to start a new line, so when we read it in, we can split the data properly. Okay, so we're going to write a return and we're going to write the country number items so that the data that's only the data that's been entered will be getting written to the file. Okay, so we're going to add another return because remember we need to separate our data to file and then it's the file path. Okay, so we've written the name of the country to the file. Now we're going to write the currency. We don't need a return this time because we've added the return on to the end of country. Okay, so we don't need the return this time. So we're just going to add that in. Okay, and then last but not least, we've got write exchange. Oh. Now we're not going to put return in this time because we've already got it in the country name. Okay, if we put another one here, what that would do is it put a double return in, so we would have data being split by a return and it would add in a return as a country name. Okay, it would mess up the rest of our data. So we're not putting it at the end because we've already got it at the start. So if we added one, then when we run it the second time, it will add the return on then. Okay, but this would usually have a return here and not here, but because our actual file has already data in it, we need to return at the start. Okay. Now that we have written the contents of our arrays into the file, we then need to close the file. And remember, to do that, all you have to do is type close file, the file path. Okay, and then that will close our file. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to look at. I'm going to click apply there. Let's look at the actual text file we've got. Okay, so if we quickly, so there we go, we've got our task 3. Okay, now task 3, as you can see, starts off with France and then ends with Canada, and it's got the Canadian dollar at 1.2. Okay, so if we then close that, okay, so we close that and then minimize our code. Okay, if we run our program, now you might not be able to see it properly, but trust me, I'm running the program. Okay, so if I click the task 4 button and then run it, it's going to ask me to enter a country name. So I'm going to put in Scotland, click OK, and then I'm going to put in the sterling, because that's what we use in the UK. And the exchange rate for Scotland is 1. It's £1 to the pound. Then we click OK. Now, if we look at our file again, right, if I close that, open it back up, you'll see that at the bottom of my task 3, it now has Scotland and sterling 1. So, quickly show you that. There you go. So as you can see, it now has Scotland, sterling and 1. So if I run my program, so let's run the code for task 3, so let's just press the task 3 button, then you will see that I have Scotland, sterling 1 there. Now, let's see what happened there. So if we click that button again this time, there you go. Don't know what happened there. But as you can see, we've got Scotland at the bottom, sterling there, and then we've got exchange rate there. Right, so remember, that should be you for task 4, but if you need any help, feel free to email me again.